I don't know who it was. It was either Moses or Ernest Hemingway that started a book by saying it was the best of times and it was the worst of times. And maybe that's a little bit how you can describe the book of Nehemiah for the writer there and himself, Nehemiah. That's what we've been looking at as we went through. But, you can kind of describe that a little bit today, too. In our immediate area, I'm sure we have lots and lots of illustrations of the worst of times right now. There's a lot of people who are struggling. I've heard of different places, a business in our area that recently let go 10 people at this place, another one that this week is going to let go maybe as many as 15 other people, and you've been hearing that. That's kind of the trickling down that's going on in our culture. But at the same time, I recently read an article, and some of you guys I loaned it to a month or two ago. There was a gentleman who was high up in the government financial structure and an overview of all that. And he asked a question. He said, in the history of the United States of America, what year was number one for manufactured goods? And what year did they make the most manufactured goods as they ever did before? And you can start guessing in your mind, but the answer was 2007, last year. Last year was the most productive manufactured goods in the United States of America. The best of times, but yet we seem to be in sort of the lowest of times. We live in an economy that's kind of unusual because we have people who are struggling, but yet almost everybody in our nation will be classified in the top 5% of the richest people in the world. So, I mean, it's just hard to explain. We're struggling. It's probably a comparative thing that we're compared with each other. When I was growing up, my dad used to work 2 jobs, and so he would work daytime and then go to another job. Don't see that as much today, but we do see 2 parents working jobs. And so it's just a little bit different, and times are different. For Nehemiah, it was sort of the same thing. You can look at it and you can say, boy, what a struggle this was. He had to deal with all these external obstacles. He was given an assignment, a task. He was doing it, but there was all kinds of attacks from the outside on him, and it was difficult for him. Then we looked even last week at some of the internal struggles, how the people who were working with him kind of rebelled a little bit. They had this great outcry. It was unfair, and so he was struggling with all this, and we looked at that because it's a good thing to look at. You and I go through things like that. We face struggles and obstacles, and we need to overcome them. But today's lesson could possibly be one of the even more difficult. Now, last week you're saying, every week you say this is the worst thing you can face. Last week I said, when the people are not on track with them, when they're rebelling against them, that's horrible. But here's another struggle that's pretty tough to deal with, and that is the struggle of success. That's a tough thing to have to deal with. And Nehemiah's story is that sometime during his work over the city of Jerusalem, his job was build the walls, rebuild walls that had been destroyed by Babylon. They're just laid low, rubble. Rebuild that so we can encase the city of Jerusalem and particularly have a safe place, not just to live, but also to worship and serve God. That was really a huge assignment for him. And so sometime during this process, when he's doing this, he gets appointed, I guess they called him the governor of Jerusalem. You and I would look at it more like a mayor kind of position, but we're talking about Jerusalem. This is a huge, influential city, and he's been appointed as the mayor or governor of this particular city. And by the way, we learn that he serves in that position for 12 years. He will serve for 12 years in that. So this is something that Nehemiah is facing, and he's now got the level of success that is really going to be helpful to him. And I'm going to put up here a quote from a good Scotsman. We always got to have good Scotsman quotes, and this is Thomas Carlyle. He's a historian, kind of writer, kind of thing, and he says this: adversity is hard on a man. You would agree with that. Hard is hard, right? But for one man who can stand prosperity, there are 100 that will withstand adversity. If you caught that, for people who are going through difficulties and hard times, you can find 100 of them who can go through that and do it well, compared to the one guy who can go through prosperity and do that well. That's pretty rare. The guy who is prosperous and does all the right stuff in his life and in his heart. It's sort of like that, everybody's seen that bumper sticker, t-shirt, logo thing that said, I saw it long, years and years and years ago, that said, "Just once, Lord, I want to prove to you that winning the lottery won't spoil me." Well, you know what? It probably will. I haven't won the lottery. And part of the reason is, for some reason, I haven't played it, and I don't understand the correlation. But I haven't won the lottery, so I don't think I get to prove that theory. But we read lots of stories of people who have, and you hear the stories of how that has really turned out to be more of a curse. I'm not sure what commentary I got this out of, but it just said, few people can live in the lap of luxury. That's not an easy thing for people to do. And I said in my notes, yeah, just let's witness this. Let's say athletes. Manny Ramirez, $18 million a year, but he'd really like to get a little bit more if he could. So what do? I quit on my team. That way they have to trade me to a team that'll give me more money. And so, it's just the greed breeds greed, breeds greed. And we read lots of stories of athletes who get the big money, and so they go to all the clubs, and whatever happens at 4:10 a.m., it's usually not good. And they're the ones right there leading the way because they all of a sudden get wealth that they have absolutely no concept how to deal with it. And and by the way, even though they're out there getting arrested, doing all the really, really good things that wealthy people want to do, you're not somebody until you have a mugshot, I guess. But they're out there doing all this kind of stuff, and then 10 years later, you find out they're bankrupt. They couldn't deal with the millions that they had. Entertainment. Every day in the newspaper, they tell you who's been arrested for this and who's coming out of rehab for this and that. And they had all the money, they had all the stuff, they had the popularity, the fame, everything that the normal person would dream of. They just don't know how to handle it. Politicians, a lot of them are proving that they don't know how to handle their power. It's a very sad commentary of today, but people just don't know how to handle that. We can go through adversity, we just don't seem to be able to handle prosperity real well. There was a writer in the book of Psalms. His name was Asaph, and he wrote 12 different psalms, and one of them, in Psalm 75, is really kind of interesting. He will tell us some things about the sovereignty of God, how God is in control, and that anything good comes from God. And then here's what he says in verse 5. Do not lift your horns against heaven. Do not speak with outstretched neck. What in the world does that mean? What that means is don't be a braggart. Don't be arrogant before God. God is going to bless us with all kinds of things. You know what? Stay balanced with that. Just because you have stuff doesn't mean that you're any better than somebody who doesn't have that. It is God's good wishes toward you, and that's why you have it. So don't become arrogant. Don't stretch your neck, and don't lift your horns. I don't know what a horn is, but you don't lift it, and you don't brag about that. Verse 6, no one from the east or the west or from the desert can exalt a man. No one can raise that person up, make them better, and do all the things that promotes that person. None of us can do that because it's only God, and it tells us that, but it is God who judges. He brings one down, he exalts another. It is all God's good wishes. Now, some people would argue with you and say, well, the reason why this guy is doing so much better than I am, this guy, even though we work at the same place, we do similar kind of things, but he is the one that got the promotions. He's the one who got all the raises. He's the one who gets all the popularity. And it's because he was in the right place at the right time around the right people. That's what some people will say. The truth is, if Asaph knows anything about life, and if what God has revealed to us, it is God that makes those promotions and those determinations. Now, there's always things behind the scenes that we don't know, even if it's us involved in it. But behind your recent promotion, behind your recent exaltation, was the sovereign hand of God. If somebody promoted you, if you got praised, if you got looked on with favor in any way, it's God that did it. It wasn't you. It's easy for us to say, wow, I'm a good pastor. I'm a good coach. I'm a good this or that. It's easy for any of us to take those kind of things. I'm a good worker. I can do this and this well. We can all look at life that way, but it's God that gives us the abilities to move and to do the things we are. We're the recipients of God's goodness and of his grace. The thing that we need to learn how to do, and this is a hard thing to learn, I think, or at least I thought it was at one time, is learning how to accept well the gifts from God. Letting God bless you in different ways and learning how to accept it. That is not an easy thing to do. Maybe there's a level of humility in that is just not fun to go through. And I would then say some of that, maybe not all of it, but some of that is a false humility. Sort of like, oh, no, I can't accept this from your hand, God. I'm okay. I can do it myself. Well, there's a lot of false humility in a statement like that. Some people believe that, I was reading it, I find this really hard to believe, but I was reading in one guy's writings that there are Christians who will say, I cannot take that promotion or I cannot take that position because I'm a Christian, and Christians shouldn't be in this arena or in that arena. Now, I understand that if that arena is sinfully laced. I understand that. But why would a person say, I can't be the foreman, I can't be the office manager, I can't be a leader because I'm a Christian? That doesn't make any sense to me at all, because I would think that what we want to do is to follow the lead of God and try to have as much influence and as much impact as humanly possible on the rest of our world, including our work world. So that's kind of hard for me to understand. I think maybe some of that comes down to the truth is they're afraid of responsibility, and maybe even more than that, they don't want accountability. And that's something all of us really do a great job of trying not to have anything to do with, is accountability. Let me do what I want to do, leave me alone, don't anybody hold me accountable, and I'll feel really good. A few years ago, I know one of a real well-known author and a great author wrote a book, and it got really popular. Now, I'm going to suggest that his writing the book and what his purposes were very, very good, very pure. What he wrote was really excellent. The reason I think it got, this is my own opinion, the reason I think it got popular is for all the wrong reasons. It was a book that was called The Prayer of Jabez, and it's taken from 1 Chronicles 4:10, which says this. It's a prayer, and it's the only thing that you get from Jabez. Oh, that you, he's praying to God, oh, that you would bless me and enlarge my territory. Let your hand be with me and keep me from harm so that I will be free from pain. Probably most of you remember the book, The Prayer of Jabez. It was out 2, 3, 4 years ago. Little booklet. I've got it in the office. It's a nice booklet. Mr. Wilkinson wrote that, and I think his intentions were really, really good. I'm sure he was okay with making $1 or $2, but I think his idea was good. But I think a lot of people bought this thing up, thinking, wow, finally, there's the prayer that if I pray it, everything goes well. I can remember driving through Akron years ago and a billboard that told you that if you pray this prayer to St. Jude, then you will be successful and healthy all the time. And I thought, then I will never die. Wow, that's pretty cool. But, there's no guarantee like that. This prayer looks like it's that kind of a prayer, doesn't it? Because it's like, God bless me. Now, who doesn't want God to bless them? I mean, not too many of us are saying, no, God, please don't bless me. Just really destroy my life. That's what I really want. I want to be a martyr for you. I don't think any of us are praying that. Enlarge my territory. Give me more acreage, another woods, another creek, or whatever. I don't know what we're looking for. More deer. That'd be nice. Your hand be with me. Who doesn't want the presence of God in their life? That's a great thing to have. Keep me from harm. Boy, I want that. I don't like boo-boos. I don't like anything like those. It's fun not to hurt. It's fun to feel good. And that's what I would like all the time if that's possible. So this sounds like a really good prayer. It worked for Jabez. Maybe it'll work for me if I chant it so many times a day or whatever I try to do. But I think we're missing the basic thing that Jabez was really praying about. What he was praying was not for good stuff to be smothered on him so that he'd be happily ever after, but he was praying, asking God for opportunities to honor him, to live for him, to proclaim him, to bring glory to his name, and then out of those opportunities he would be blessed. Enlarge my borders means give me lots and lots of chances to do what you want me to do, God. I'm content with what you have given me, but if I could serve you more, if I could do more things for you, it would be just really wonderful. And I would love to do that. And I know that as I am faithful to you, and as I honor you, and as I serve you, you in return will bless me with things that will just amaze my life. Not necessarily material things, not necessarily health things, but God will give blessings that are amazing. Well, as we look at chapter 5 in Nehemiah, which is what we're about to do, we're going to find several interesting things in his life. Nehemiah 5, and I'm going to start at verse 14, which says, Moreover, from the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when I was appointed to be their governor in the land of Judah, until his 32nd year, 12 years, neither I nor my brothers ate the food allotted to the governors. Here's how you handle prosperity. First of all, and you have this in your bulletin outline, promotion will bring privileges. That's just natural. That's always true. If you get some special award or you get promoted by people, it's going to bring those privileges. And with every privileges that's brought, you need to be a proper and good steward with that. In his case, as governor, he had an expense account. He could get food and all kinds of other luxuries. But as a follower of God, he understood that he needed to be a person of integrity and guard against taking advantage of that. He points out very specifically that although I had this food account, I had this expense account that allowed me to do what I wanted to do, I and my brothers were very careful not to take advantage of that because we understood that there were people working hard. We understood there were people suffering. There were people who had outcries against all the injustices. With privileges, there are temptations. The temptation of a leader in this kind of position was to build his own empire instead of building for God. And Nehemiah viewed this position not as something for him, but as a trusted position handed to him by God. Let's look at verses 15 and 16 also. he will go on to say, but the earlier governors, those preceding me, placed a heavy burden on the people and took 40 shekels of silver from them in addition to food and wine. Their assistants also lorded it over the people. But out of reverence for God, I did not act like that. Instead, I devoted myself to the work on this wall. All my men were assembled there for the work. We did not acquire any land. You know, promotions can change things in your life real quickly, and they'll threaten the policies by which you live by. The former governors who went before him all abused the system. They all did stuff, they took advantage of people, and because of that, they were abusing their own people. The elite were selfishly exploiting the poor. Nehemiah comes into that. He's giving that position. It is the pattern. It is what the people are used to. It's what his staff is used to. It's what everybody knows goes on. Hey, everybody does it. Everybody's doing it. Come on, Nehemiah, get with the system. You need to do this as well. His present labor force, when he took that place of office, if there was anybody still intact in his cabinet, in his upper labor level, they were probably all benefiting from this as well. And when Nehemiah came in and said, you know, this has to change, that was not popular among his own co-workers, the people closest to him. They had learned to take the system and use it to their advantage as well. They were seeing equally as good times. Nehemiah said the corruption has to end somewhere. The old ways, the taxing our own people, the giving them loans that they couldn't pay on, foreclosing on them, all that dirty politics which was prevalent needed to stop. It's interesting because those servants who were under the governor knew that the more food and money that they brought in for the government, the more that would go into their own pockets. What an incredible exploitation this was. The more that we could steal from our own people, the more we could have ourselves, and we like having food, we like having things, we like having fun. I think it's the King James Version that Nehemiah says, I did not do so. That's neat, really weird wording, but he said, I was not about to do that. That's not the way I was going to act. My administration is going to be different than that. Nehemiah was unbending, except for when he was on his knees. He was able to maintain a pure and clean relationship before God, and that is a very, very rare man. Look at verse 17. It says, furthermore, 150 Jews and officials ate at my table, as well as those who came to us from the surrounding nations. He had any number of issues and side projects that he had to work on, but he stayed on the task of building the wall. He never lost sight of his calling. He's in Jerusalem to help people, not to exploit them. He was there to exemplify the law of God, not to violate it. He was there to rebuild the wall, not to build a personal empire. And some could say, yeah, but you know, he had one job and one job only. Sort of like the old Kentucky Fried Chicken commercial. We do one thing only, we do it good. Well, that was his job. He had one job, and you say that was pretty easy for him to stay on task when that's all he had to do. But that's not true. Verse 17, we looked at that. He had 150 cabinet members that, oh, by the way, ate every meal with him in his palace, in his place of work. And all their guests, and people were coming, dignitaries from other areas, coming every day, in and out, to visit with them. It'll go on to list in there all the animals and all the stuff that was used to prepare food for them. He had a lot going on. And yet, he says he never used the expense account that was given to him, that all the other governors did. They took from the people. Nehemiah said, no, we're going to take this out of my personal stuff. Verse 18 says, each day 1 ox, 6 choice sheep, and some poultry were prepared for me, and every 10 days an abundant supply of wine of all kinds. In spite of all this, I never demanded the food allotted to the governor because the demands were heavy on these people. Wouldn't it be great if we had a leader politician, a governor, a president, who said, you know what, things are really, really hard. I know that I'm getting paid a couple $100,000 a year. I'm not taking it. I'm not going to take it. I can't do that to these people. That would be pretty cool. Now, I do understand that we have had some leaders that have done that in part. I don't know of anybody who's turned down the salary altogether, but they've turned down raises and some other things, and that's honorable. That really is honorable. But here's a guy saying, I can't do this. I cannot do that to my people. Promotion impacts, it affects other people. Leading is a people-oriented business. And a strong leader is not one who runs roughshod over everybody else. I think we're seeing changes in that mentality, and I know in sports we are. Everybody honors Vince Lombardi, but everybody knows that he could not coach today in his mentality. You know, the roughshod that he just, all his players were in fear of him. Doesn't work today with today's athletes. And we know better than that even in the leadership thing. Those former governors went way beyond their rightful privileges. They took their privileges and so much more. And they tried very diligently to pad their own pockets. But Nehemiah came in, and he was different because he had a compassionate heart. He cared about the people, and he never lost that sensitive spirit that he had for the people of Israel. Look back at verse 15 again real quickly. Right at the very end, it says, in the last phrase, last sentences, it says, but out of reverence for God, I did not act like that. Out of reverence for, what makes a man so different? What makes this guy so much different than all the other ones who went before him? He had the same position, had the same privileges, he could have abused all the same way. He said, out of my reverence, my awe for God, I wouldn't do that. He would say, my accountability to my Lord is the guiding point of my life. Me being accountable before God is the thing that motivates everything I do. That's how Nehemiah would look at it. It's the way you and I ought to look at it. Because face the truth, ultimately, the thing that's going to happen for all of us is we're all going to step from this life into the presence of God. And someday we're going to give an account to him. And so that should be the thing that dictates, not whether I'm a Cleveland fan, Philadelphia fan, or anything like that, or whether I work for this business or that business, or whether my family is this large or this small. That's all important, significant stuff. But standing before Jesus Christ and giving an account for what I've done in this life, that is the guiding point for everything that you and I do, and it should be. Nehemiah said, I awe God too much to indulge myself. God is so great and so good and so merciful and so gracious that I don't dare live just for me. I must live in respect of him. So therefore, he would guard against the nice things. So today, bringing it back to our world today, let's take a look at some of the perspectives and things that helps us out just by looking at his life and this idea of how he handled his success. Number one would be, we should accept the blessings of God. We need to be able to point to God and say, you know what, this good thing that happened today, God, thank you. That was a gift from you. I know it was. And thank you very much for that. It may be as simple as somebody just smiling at you and giving you a nice day kind of feeling. Or it may be something where God just really dumps blessings on you that amazes you. But it's all from God, and we need to learn to accept that, the privileges and the opportunities as well. When God gives us that, we need to take advantage. Our motivation should be in terms of what God can do through us and in us. We also need to see that promotions can bring temptations. Anytime that you get patted on the back, there's a temptation to say, oh yeah, that's true. I agree. I am good, therefore I deserve, or whatever. And we need to be very, very careful about that. You need to determine in your heart not to abuse it. You cannot abuse that. You got to be careful to stay balanced, recognize it's all God, it's all from God, and that He is the one blessing you. Then we want to approach our promotions with the proper attitude. Always, always stand in awe of God, who He is, what He has done. And that's the way we live our lives. As we look at the blessings from Him, as we understand the balance because of all the temptations that can come, we also need to just give it back to Him and have that proper perspective and that proper attitude of being in awe of God. Nehemiah lived that way. And I'm going to guess that his responsibilities and his privileges were a whole lot bigger than mine and yours. I'm guessing that the tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people that lived in his city, that he governed, and the responsibilities that the government allowed him to do to build this wall, and all the privileges that were his, the resources that he could have easily grabbed. And even if he just took a little bit, I mean, after all, don't we deserve a little bit? He could have easily grabbed for that. But his understanding of who God is, his knowledge of the fact that he was accountable to God, just like all the rest of us are, even though God placed him there, and he clearly knew that, he understood the balance of that and living for God. We need to learn to do the same thing. We need to learn to not just ask for the blessing, but to understand and see the opportunity that God's given us and recognize that ultimately the only thing that matters is when we stand before Jesus Christ. Would you join me in prayer, please? Father, I just thank you so much for people like Nehemiah who have gone on before us, flesh and blood people who got it right and who understood, even in the midst of incredible obstacles, armies against him. We don't have that. People in his midst, his own teammates who rose up and just were against him and fought against him and was just angry. And we don't always have that, sometimes, but not always. And then to have just the unbelievable wealth and success just plopped on him, and yet to be able to stay balanced and to know that it's all yours and it comes from you. God, teach us that. Teach us to understand that every good and perfect gift comes from above, comes from our Father, who's the Father of all lights. And in you, there's no shadow of turning whatsoever. In us, there's all kinds of weakness and frailty. We waver back and forth, but there's strength in you, God. And help us to understand that above anything else, you showed us beyond human wealth, you showed us grace and mercy, salvation for all eternity. We can stand confidence before you because of what Jesus Christ did on a cross 2,000 years ago. Thank you for that payment of sin. Thank you for the hope of eternity that we can have when we repent and give Jesus the responsibility of covering our sin. And when we come underneath the blood of the cross, that we receive salvation. God, you did it all. We receive it all. What a tremendous plan you have. Help us today to live for you. Our goal this year is to grow in the ability to please you. And God, we want to be able to do that. Help us to live with eternity in mind and with our standing before you always in our mind. Lord, I just pray that you would use each person here as your Spirit searches their hearts, and that you would bring them to an assurance of eternal life, an assurance of a strong relationship with you. In Christ's name we would pray. Amen.